Hey YouTube, welcome to a history of where I go over a bunch of different Pokemon and tell you their place in the GBL meta throughout the season, throughout the 16 plus seasons that we've had so far. So I've done a bunch of these already: Skarmory, Sableye, Azumarill, Hypno, and now we're looking at what I have in this title: either Zyoniks' favorite Pokemon just to use, or maybe his favorite overall, a Marowak. So again, history time here. We're gonna go over first stat products, move sets and typings, just to give you an idea of like what makes it stronger or weak to start with. Then I will give you its history in the meta, its sort of upgrade with Shadow Bone, which was probably one of the first raid days, like raid day specific to a Pokemon, was probably Marowak with Shadow Bone. And then we'll go over its current place in the current meta now. So, well, as you can kind of see, its current place is 144 in the current meta. When we look at some of the main things here, stat product, again, overall stat product, pretty decent. 110 attack, 145 defense, 126 stamina, 2025 overall. So that 145 defense makes it kind of sneaky bulky. And as you see, it's got traits bulky and defensive. It's one of those Pokemon where, but it doesn't have that super low attack that you get with like Azumarill or Medi. So it's got enough of an attack to threaten you, but it's also not going to just get completely beat up, because like some of these Glacier Pokemon where you feel like you have to shield everything, because it actually has some defense to it. So stat product wise, pretty nice. When we get into the moves are, I think, what limits it overall now, and even back then is what caused this limitation. So this is Fire Spin with a buff, remember. So Fire Spin got buffed in terms of damage or energy. Which one got buffed? I think it was the damage output that got buffed. This, don't quote me on that. One of these two got buffed in this last few. So this is actually Marowak slightly better than before. And again, two things to note about fire Pokemon. Fire Pokemon have always been underrepresented in the meta, and that is because water Pokemon have always been overrepresented in the meta, right? Azumarill, Swampert were go-to from season 1, and we've only increased the amount of water Pokemon that are relevant since. So fire Pokemon, much to unfortunately Zyoniks probably here in mind with Kanto Ninetales, which I'm sure I'll do one on eventually, fires have always had limitations in this meta. So their moveset was Rock Smash, Hex, or Fire Spin. So back in the day, I would say 90% of people used Fire Spin because the damage energy combo was better than the damage energy combo on Hex. Some people, I say 10% for that, because some people would use Hex as a kind of safe swap, try to draw out something you think it's like fire, and then you're actually using a faster energy generating Hex move, and then you're focusing on your ghost moves. So back in the day, the moveset that you used on Marowak was Bone Club and Shadow Ball, because Shadow Bone was not a thing yet. The biggest weakness to Marowak since the beginning of time was Bone Club. Bone Club is the most pathetic move I've ever seen in my entire life. It says it's a bait move. I would much rather throw literally any other resisted secondary move as opposed to Bone Club. Bone Club is pathetic. 35 energy, 40 damage, 1.14, no secondary effects, no lowering of your opponent's attack or defense, no buffing your attack or defense. It is just a terrible, terrible bait move. And that's all it was a bait move. And if you had your Shadow Ball resisted, if you were going against a normal typing or you were going against a dark typing, you essentially lose, because the Fire Spin wasn't going to add up enough because it didn't have the damage overall. And Bone Club was, again, one of the most pathetic moves, if not the most, I got probably one of the top 5 most pathetic moves in the game. So Marowak will always, always, always struggle until it gets a better move than Bone Club. If Bone Club is one of your moves that you use, and you kind of have to use it, because I'll go over that in a second. You have to kind of use it. It automatically limits you. And then Shadow Ball. Shadow Ball is a great 55 energy stab, 120 damage, 2.18, right? So 55 energy that does 2.18 damage per energy. That's pretty strong. Then I think I'm almost positive this was one of the first raid only things. So to get shiny Marowak in raids with Shadow Bone. So is your first chance of getting pretty sure your first chance of getting Shadow or shiny Marowak, and it was your first chance of getting Shadow Bone. So these were the first raid days. Oh, and I want to say years and years ago. And Shadow Bone gives you basically the equivalent of Shadow Ball, just quicker. So 2 pros, it's a quicker energy, 45 versus 55. Less damage, obviously, 96 versus 120, but the same damage per energy overall, 2.13 versus 2.18. Basically the same, so get that same damage per energy output at a lower cost is great. With a 20% chance of lowering your opponent's defense. So you pick up a secondary sort of stat there, which is huge. So Shadow Bone, big improvement for Marowak over Shadow Ball. And the problem with Bone Club, I'll go back to this for now, and then we'll go over Shadow Ball. We'll go over typing in a second, then we'll go over the early stages of GBL and why it's changed. As you can see, Fire Spin is a 3.33 energy per turn, and is a 3-turn move, so those are a little tricky to like add up overall. But basically, in conclusion, because Bone Club is so bad, you need to land it. You need it back in the day to land Shadow Ball, and now you need to land Shadow Bone, essentially. But the energy on Fire Spin is not enough to make up for your otherwise limited charge move, and you're not you're not glossy, and you're not hard hitting. You're sort of in between. But the Fire Spin energy generation and the Shadow Bone combo does not outweigh your otherwise weaknesses of being a fire typing and a ghost typing in the meta. And the fire ghost typing, it was the second thing that made it really strong and really weak at the same time. So let's start with its strengths. A lot of resistances. Double resist fighting, double resist normal, double resist bug, single resist steel, poison, ice, grass, fire, fairy. Whenever you can have 9 resistances, it's amazing. It's amazing to have that many resistances. However, I would trade those 9 resistances to get rid of, heck, 3 of these weaknesses, never mind 4, and there's 5 of them. Rock is the whatever one, and there's some rock out there, but that's actually the whatever one. Dark, ghost, ground, water, and that, unfortunately, is just everywhere in the meta right now. Right? Even some of your fighters are ghosts and annihilate. Again, if they're a ghost, you can hit super effective as well. But tons of darks like Sableye, Umbreon, tons of ground, all your mud boys like Whiscash, Clodsire, not a mud boy, but Clodsire, Quagsire, Waters. I didn't even talk about the Lanterns and Pelipper's and Swamperts and everything there, right? So there's Poliwrath. There's too many waters and ground and ghost and dark for Marowak to have really any play. So where Marowak's going to be strong is in limited cups right now, where some of these weaknesses are banned. If some of these weaknesses are banned, having all these resistances in certain metas is going to be great, right? Again, if ghost is banned, you need to get in as your fire typing. So that's that. Marowak was an OG Pokemon. So OG Marowak with Shadow Ball here, against the old school Season 1, Season 2 GBL Pokemon. Pretty good. 7-5-1. Not surprising. You lost to stuff that you have weaknesses to. Swamperts, Muse with the claws and wild and surf. Umbreon's as a dark. Azumarill is a fairy water Pokemon. And Altaria because it resists the fire. But in that, you did pretty well, right? You hit super effective against all the steels, Skarmory, Registeel, Venusaur. There is some stuff weak to fire. Hypno, you hit super effective with the Shadow Ball. So it was actually quite strong. So what happened? How did Pokemon that had its limitations got upgraded with Shadow Bone kind of disappear from the meta? And again, there's basically 2 sort of things that happen to the meta. The So 1724 record. It's basically, I see we should maximize stat products here because it actually may make it even worse when you add all this bulk on for all these other Pokemon. 1823, okay, so slightly better. 1823, what happened? What happened was two things. We know the current state of the meta. The current state of the meta is water. I went over this in my video yesterday, but if you go to just rankings, there are like 12 different Pokemon in the top 30 that are water. Feraligatr, Quagsire, Swampert, Lantern, Azumarill, Mantine, Whiscash, Empoleon, Poliwrath, Pelipper again, Quagsire, Toxapex, Jellicent. So just loaded with water. You cannot also take away the fact that there are way more darks now than there were before. Mandibuzz, Guzzlord, Wireless, Scrafty, Umbreon, Sableye. There's more normal typings that resist your move, right? Lickitung, everyone has their Lickitungs now. You have like Wiggly as the fairy. You have, again, you're going to resist fairy as a fire, but Diggersby, Pidgeot, Vigoroth. And then the Ghost, Annihilate as a fighter ghost, Jellicent, Trevenant, and Skeldirge just came on the scene, which is a better fire to use as a like a fire ghost. If you want a better fire ghost to use, you're using Skeldirge because you have a boosted Incinerate, which has better damage and better energy combo. So you have better that. You still have Shadow Ball, which is like the nuke, and you have like either a great coverage move in Disarming Voice to take care of like the darks that was your weakness. So with replacements like Skeldirge, with an abundance of water and darks and ghost, and with just no improvement to Bone Club, everything else just kind of rose up, and Marowak just stayed where it was. And unfortunately, staying where you are when the meta changing is not good enough to be competitive. So 18 and 23, and again, all your waters and grounds, all your darks, all your rocks, all your normal typings, and these are not the problem is I don't mind Pokemon losing. I mind Pokemon losing that when you get killed, and these 119, 133, 142, 200s, 250s, even 300s, those are hard losses. And what those hard losses mean is not only are you gonna lose that matchup in the even shield, even energy scenario, when you're losing this bad, not only is your opponent taking switch and even shield scenario at best, at worst they're taking switch and even shield scenario. At best, they're going to come out with a ton of energy. At least one other charge move, and then you're already so far behind. You lost switch, even on shields, and your opponent's going to be able to launch charge moves at you. So with that many super hard losses, it makes it tough. Now, in terms of the wins, there's options, right? There are some things weak to fire. Now, some of these Venusaur, Sandslash, Ninetales are not played as much anymore. Skarmory's everywhere. Yep, Skarmory's everywhere. Medi, it's a nice answer to counter users, right? Ghost double resists fighting. So you resist all these fighters. And then even in some neutral matchups, you do decent. Like Poliwrath can hit you Scald, but you resist that. So you resist the counter, so it kind of evens out there. Even Gligar, like you're going to lose because it can land a dig on you, which is super effective, but you can kind of stay in a lot of these matchups. And that makes it pretty strong. So that is basically Marowak. Yeah, I think this is going to be a little bit of a shorter episode because that is already 14 minutes. That is basically the problem with Marowak. And why it's not used as much. So 124 is not a bad ranking. That's a shadow. Even 144 is not a bad ranking. It's just the current state of the meta. Like even the traits, there's not a lot of negatives here. But bulky, spammy, and defensive. Like again, you're not gonna get just like in a even if something hits neutral on you, you don't need to worry about it taking you out right away because you got some defense to you. But really, the limitation is the Bone Club, in my opinion. It's the typing in the Bone Club. Right now, the current state of the meta, like they buff Fire Spin, right? This is Marowak with a buff Fire Spin. The current state of the meta, there's too many Dark, Ghost, Ground, and Water for you to be competitive, and Bone Club is your biggest issue. So if those two things switch, I think you have more play. Like if you get a better ground move, like if you got like a dig or something, you would be having like a dig Shadow Bone combo would be deadly. Would be deadly on Marowak. So giving you a second move that is actually usable, that is a nice ground move that is usable, like Scorching Sands or Dig or something like that. Just Bone Club is so bad. Bone Club's the worst. And the second is there needs to be a shift in the meta. Like I love, and I'll do Ninetales. I love using Ninetales. I can dominate with Ninetales. I cannot dominate with Ninetales in a water and ground meta. There's just no, you can't, and a lot more dragons. You can't work around it. As good as you are, and as much as you want this Pokemon to be good, you can't beat that situation. So unfortunately, the state of the meta, and then the lack of change overall. Like Shadow Ball was an improvement, but Shadow Ball was pretty good, right? Shadow Ball was already a great move. This is an improvement because it's faster. But other than that, like the Shadow Ball was fine. But it's just not help. Your secondary move is not good enough. And all these other moves are way too high energy for Fire Spin. It's not like you have a 4.5 energy per turn Mud Shot here, right? If you have a 4.5 energy Mud Shot per turn, and it can run something like Shadow Bone, Fire Blast. Fire Blast is 80 energy, which is really, really high. But like if you can do that, then maybe you have a lot more play here. But the problem is with a 3.33 energy per turn Fire Spin, you're not getting to Fire Blast. Even Flame Wheel at 55 is kind of tough, right? And that's why they gave it Shadow Bone, because it's quicker than Energy Ball. So unfortunately, unless you get a faster energizing fast move with maybe like a better fire move, like you would have to do a couple things in my opinion. You'd have to give it like a better ground move for starters. One of two things: either a better ground move than Bone Club, give it Dig or some other ground move, or maybe if you gave it Mud Shot, you can get to the Mud Shot would still take, because it's only 9, so it's 9, 18, 27, 36, 45. So it would take 5 to get a Shadow Bone. That's pretty solid. 5 Mud Shots to a Shadow Bone would be pretty solid. But then your second one, you'd either need to do 54, so you can even get to the Flame Whale. So 63, which is 7. But even 7 for a 1.31 damage per energy is not a good move. And then Fire Blast would still take, even with Mud Shot, would take 9 Mud Shots to get to a Fire Blast, which is a lot. You'd have to like and then if Shadow Bone is your bait move at 45, it'd be a lot tougher there. So I think the moveset is a little too limiting for Marowak, and then the typing is very limiting for Marowak in the Great League. But yeah, that is it. Stay tuned for more of these. Stay tuned for more Great League teams this week, and we'll go from there. Anyways, that's it. Thanks for watching. See you guys in the next one.